Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Peace be upon you. Through the Eyes of a Believer is a series of recordings about reflections and issues and questions on life. And the purpose of life is the mother of all reflections. And this is what I'll be starting this series with. The purpose of life is an umbrella type of issue. It is through it we can view other issues and reflections in life. Such questions such as, how do I know what is right and what is wrong? Others are like, for example, why am I not like her? A question that usually pops up in our mind when we feel that we have failed or when we are discontent with what we have. I will focus this recording on the purpose of life and why is it important to know this purpose. And I will follow up with later recordings dealing with other reflections and issues. If we start with the purpose of life, usually other intertwined questions pop up, such as, why is it important to know the purpose of life? People are living, they eat, they drink, they get married, they die. Do they all know the purpose of life? And is there one purpose in life? Or do we make up new goals for ourselves as we interact with life? And are these goals that we make up for ourselves, are these the purpose of life? All these questions I would like to clarify and connect together by drawing an analogy. A mother brought her 4 children to this room. It's a toys room. And she said, children, in 5 minutes, I'm going to open the door for you and you're going to go into that room and play. There are lots of toys, there are lots of children, there's candy, there's lots of good things. But when I let you into that room, you have to achieve the purpose of being in that room. If you do achieve this purpose, it will prepare you to go into an even bigger room with more toys and with things that you have never seen before. Now, when her children heard that, they were so excited. But her second child got so distracted when she talked about things that you have never seen before, and he started daydreaming and he stopped listening. And so the rest of her children asked, so what do we do? And she said, okay, when you go into the room, you have to play with certain toys that will increase your memory, that will raise your intellect, it'll help you get stronger, it'll make you even more fit and healthy. And the children there, you have to interact with them in a very polite manner. You have to share with them, you have to work as a team, and you have to help them also achieve the purpose of being in that room. And one thing you have to also be careful with is you never break toys. And so the children said, that's okay, we can go into that room. And she said, I have to warn you. One thing is, the time that you'll be spending is limited. I will not tell you how long you're going to be there. But as soon as I open the door and I call out your name, you have to come out. There's no extension time. The other thing is, if you play with toys that I asked you not to play with, or interact with the children in a negative way, or break toys, this will affect you in a negative way. It will affect your preparation for the next room in a negative way. And so she opened the door and all 4 children went inside. They spent the time that their mother allowed them to, and then she opened the door and they all came out. Now, there's a summary and analysis of what happened inside that room with these 4 children. The first child, he followed the purpose of being in that room. And so what he did is he played with the toys that his mother asked him to. He played with the children nicely, and so he had lots of friends. And he didn't play with the toys that his mother said not to. And of course, he didn't break any toys, and he left them so that others can achieve the same purpose as well. The second child, when he entered without a purpose, because he wasn't listening when his mother was talking. And so he went in and then he watched what everybody else is doing and he just imitated them. So he found some people lining up at a big toy, and so he said that must be the best toy, and so he stood in line. But then that was taking too long. So he started shoving other kids so he gets ahead of them. And then, of course, that created a fuss, and then he was fighting with them. And of course, he played with some toys by accident that his mother asked him to, and he played with other toys that his mother said not to. And of course, because he was running around trying to do everything, he also accidentally broke toys. The third child, he said, I'm going to be the best prepared. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go collect all the big toys in this room and keep them with me. And when children want to play with them, they have to give me something in return, like some candy or some money. And so what he did, he started, of course, fighting with the other kids because he's taking the toys away from them. And whenever somebody comes to play with him, of course, he has to fight because he needed something in return. And he also could have also broke some toys on purpose so that the children will come and play with his toys. And of course, he never played with the toys that his mother said that he should. Now, the fourth one, he tried to combine the purpose of being in that room and his own purpose. And so he played with some of the toys his mother said, and then other toys which his mother said not to. He was nice with the kids in some cases and bad with the kids in other cases. And also, because he's in a hurry to achieve more than one purpose, he accidentally broke some toys. Now, if we take this and move this analogy to life, we will find people all across the spectrum. We will find people who are living life without a purpose. They're just interacting because everybody's interacting this way with life. And we will also find people who are trying to achieve the purpose of life. We will find people who have their own purpose set, and they're meticulously working on achieving that purpose. And we will also find people who are trying to do both, achieve their own purpose and the purpose of life. Now, if we look at this carefully, we'll have two important points here. We first can notice that the first child and the third one, they both have a purpose, irrespective that it is different. But we can see that when somebody is focused on his purpose and always aware of the purpose, whether in the room or in life, then that person will behave and interact in a systematic manner, a stable manner with the elements around him or with people. And so there'll be no fluctuations in his behavior. And so he is going through a certain path, and he will end up with a result at the end. But this may not be the case for people who don't have a purpose or who are fluctuating between purposes, because then they will interact continuously in different manner with everybody around them. And there's lots of fluctuations, which at the end they may not reach a result. Now, the other also important point that we notice is that when the purpose is different, the interaction is different, and the end result is different. We can see that from these people, from the kids who are, each one of them had a different purpose. Now, somebody might say, well, what kind of different results are you talking about? Because I see everybody went into the room, everybody played, everybody had a good time, and they did what they wanted, and then they came out of the room. So from where I see it is whether they had a purpose or didn't have a purpose, or had the purpose for that room or not, everybody had a good time. And I see it the same way in life. Everybody is living and interacting with life, whether they have a purpose or not, or they know the purpose of life. Okay, so my reply is, it depends what kind of results one is looking at. If we are looking at the results that everybody's living, everybody's interacting with life, that is true. If we look at it that way, then yes, the results are the same. But there are two kinds of results that I'm looking at. The first kind of result is, well, while we are achieving our goal, how are we affecting the people around us and the environment and whatever is around us? And we can see differences in these results. For example, the first child, he went to achieve the purpose for that room, and included in that purpose was that he should play nicely and help the other kids achieve the purpose. Included in that purpose was that he doesn't break toys and he keeps them so that other people can use them. While these two purposes are not included in the third child. His purpose was to collect money. So he fought with the children and he broke some toys. And so the purpose does define the interactions and it does affect the results, at least when we look at what it's doing to everybody around that person. Now, the other result that we are interested in, when I send my husband, let's say my child is sick and he has to go to the hospital. Now, when he goes to the hospital, I am not looking if he had fun in the hospital or if he socialized or ate or something like that. I am interested, did he achieve the purpose of going to the hospital, which is to get better? If I send him to school, I'm interested in, did he achieve the purpose of going to that school, which is learning? I'm not interested if he had gym class or he ate at the canteen. And so this is the same here. I am interested to know if these kids have achieved the purpose of being in that room, which is prepare them for the next stage or going to the next room. And if we look at life, then which one of these people is more prepared to go into the next phase in life? So if somebody's interested in the results of this life, of that everybody's living, everybody's eating, everybody is getting married and we die, then and they don't really care about how man affects what's surrounding him and how much he is prepared for the next life, then probably the rest of this recording will not be of benefit. However, if we are interested in how we affect others and if we are prepared for the next life, for the next phase in life, then the rest of this recording might be of interest. Now, somebody might say, okay, I understand then if somebody is following the purpose of life, he wants to achieve the purpose of life, then yes, he will affect positively the people around him and his surroundings, and he will be prepared for the next phase of life. And I understand that if he doesn't have a purpose, then that might affect him negatively. But the point 3 and point 4 are not very clear. What if I have a purpose, but it's not to make money? What if my purpose is to help others? What if my purpose is I want to be a good lawyer, a good teacher, I want to be a good doctor, and I want to help others? Or if I'm at point 4, where I want to combine, I want to achieve the purpose of life, and I want to also help others. Now, how does that prepare me, or does it hinder my preparation for the next phase in life? Now, to answer this question, I also have 2 points to mention. The first point is I haven't really discussed the purpose of life yet, and we will see that when we discuss the purpose of life, it is an umbrella type of a subject. It covers all areas, and so as we are trying to achieve the purpose of life, we are achieving other goals as we go along the way. So it is not either the purpose or my goal, or I'm trying to combine both. They all are in one path as we achieve the purpose of life. That's one thing. Now, the other thing is, I would like to use a drawing to explain why man sometimes is not able to put goals that actually will prepare him for the next phase in life. If we look at this, this is the line of a human existence. Now, we did exist with God before we were born. We were as souls existing. And then, of course, we went through birth and we came into this material life. We're staying for a very, very short period of time, and we don't know when we're leaving. But this material life ends in death, where we pass on through to another phase, which we call al-barzakh, and then there's another phase, which is the day of judgment, and then, of course, there is eternal life. Now, what we do in this life, if we achieve the purpose of this life, then it will prepare us for eternal life in heaven. Now, the problem with man putting goals for himself and replacing the purpose of life is that man is ignorant of what comes after death. Nobody came after death and told us what's happening. He's ignorant of eternal life. He's ignorant of the barzakh. He doesn't know what happens after death. It is like the children in the story. Their mother had a complete plan how to raise her children. And so she knew what awaits them in the next room. And so according to that, she asked them to do the following while they are in this toys room. When they changed the purpose, like the third child, he started collecting money. How does he know that this is going to help him in the next room? He has no idea what's in the next room. And the same is with man. He has no idea how to prepare himself for the next phase when he has no clue what is in the next phase. Another point is also man is ignorant of his own nature. Now God talks in the Quran and he said man is made up, of course, of the body, of the human body, which has its needs. And of course there's the soul, which we have no clue about what the soul is. And then of course God talks about the intellect that he gave us. For using it we determine what is right and what is wrong. And then God talks about another entity within ourselves. It's called the nafs, or the inner self. And God says that there are three types of nafs. There's the nafs that actually entices man to do bad. And then there is the higher level of nafs, which is the one that blames man when he does bad. And then of course the best nafs is the serene nafs. This is the nafs that is content, and God is content with it. And this is the nafs that we all want to reach by the time we die. Now, God also talks about another entity, which is the heart, and it's not the physiological heart. And there are three types of hearts as well. There's the dead heart. It's a heart that doesn't care about God, is not connected to God, and does everything in this life, reacts to it according to its own needs and wants. Then there's a better heart than that, which is a sick heart. It's a heart that fluctuates between death and between a sound state. And so that heart sometimes responds to God and sometimes responds to the bad nafs or shaitan. Then of course the best heart is the sound heart. It's a heart that actually is devoted to its God. And it does everything in life to please its God. And this is the heart that we want to reach. Now, man is ignorant of any of these elements. Even the body, we have studied it so much, we still don't know anything about it. Even the brain, the intellect, the mind. So we have no clue. And we have even no clue how all of these interact together. How can we reach God with a serene nafs? How can we reach him with a sound heart? The same like the kids in the story. Their mother, when she told them, okay, you have to play with certain toys because they increase your intellect, get you stronger. If you play with the kids, then you develop your social skills and so on. So she's trying, she puts for them a goal that will cover all their growing needs and development. And because she knows more about them and she knows what awaits them in the next room. Now man is also ignorant of his own nature. So when he starts flipping goals and achieving and putting for himself goals instead of achieving the purpose of life, then he has no clue where that goal is going to lead him. If it's going to lead him to a serene nafs or to the bad nafs. And so man can do what man wants. He can put any goal that he wants, but he should not expect at the end he will be prepared for eternal life. So he should bear the consequences of his own choice. Now, where do we get this information about the destiny of man, the existence of man, and all the different elements that make up man's nature? Well, this kind of information we get it from the Quran. There are two types of information. One information we can get from using our heads, our brains, from doing experiments, going to science and so on. We can get information from there. But there are also types of information that we cannot get. They're metaphysical. They're not of the physical world, they're metaphysical, like the soul, the heart, the nafs, the barzakh, the day of judgment, the eternal life. All of these are in the metaphysical. So we can't use a source. Our source of knowledge cannot be in the physical. It has to come from the metaphysical. And so we use the Quran, which came, of course, from God. And that's the same source that we're going to use when we talk about the purpose of life. Now, God is the creator and sustainer of the whole world. He created everything and everyone. And nothing happens in this life, in this world, in this universe without his knowledge and his will. Now, man is a creation of God. And God says in the Quran that he created man so that man worships God. Worship means, actually, this is a loose translation. The actual word used in the Quran is so that ya'budun, that man goes into this relationship of ubudiyah with God. And the scholars, Ibn Abbas said ya'budun means so that they know God. So man is supposed to be in this life, supposed to know God, to love God, and enter this relationship of ubudiyah. Ubudiyah, as Ibn al-Qayyim said, is actually the 9th level of forming relationships, of caring relationships. So it is even more higher up than love. And the last one is khulla, the one that is higher than ubudiyah. So ubudiyah is a relationship of love that man chooses to enter with God, where he surrenders to God and he obeys him in everything that God tells him to. Now, man is not born directly into this relationship and higher up in the relationship. There are stages in ubudiyah. And man has to work hard on these stages of ubudiyah. And this is what we call jihad al-nafs, the struggle within our inner selves. And we have to go up in our nafs, from the one that entices man to do bad to the one that blames him, then to the serene nafs, and also the jihad, the struggle with our hearts as well. And so God says in one of the authentic sayings of the Prophet that God said, man will always do what I asked him to do and more. And as he does that, I will love him. And as I love him, I will call the angels in heaven and ask them to love him. And then love will be given to him on earth. And so developing our ubudiyah, this loving relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is the purpose of being here or being created by God. Now, then somebody would say, okay, if we are here to worship or be in this ubudiyah with God, then why did God create man in this universe where he has to interact with so many things that waste his time, that makes him angry? And he could have created him in his own world, in his own box, and then he would have had all the time in the world to worship God. Well, God knows best. And God said in the Quran also in another verse is that he created man as a vicegerent on earth. So man is supposed to uphold God's rules and laws on earth. Not that God needs man to do that, but because man needs to do that to achieve ubudiyah. How does that work? Well, there are guidelines in the Quran for dealing with everything that man needs to deal with. They're guidelines. So man, when he wants to deal with life, he goes back to the Quran and the authentic way of the Prophet. And then he gets the rules from there. And if there aren't specific ones, then the scholars for jurisprudence, they go in and they deduce the rules. Now let's give an example. What about money? There are rules in the Quran about money. For example, it is haram, religiously forbidden, to steal. It is haram also to use usury. It is you have to pay almsgiving. You have to pay zakat to the poor. You have to give charity. There are certain ways inheritance should be distributed, and so on. Gambling is not allowed, and so on. A lot of rules. Now, if man follows these rules, two things happen. First thing is that when he upholds God's rules on earth, he is making it easy also, creating the proper circumstances, not just for himself, for everybody else to practice their ubudiyah. Remember when we talked about how achieving the purpose of life helps man take care of his brothers and sisters and of the universe that is around him. So upholding God's rules on earth guarantees that he also helps others to achieve their ubudiyah and to maintain this universe for everybody else. That's one thing that happens. The other thing that happens is that when man upholds these laws and rules, then it disciplines his interaction with everything around him. And disciplining these interactions mean that man never loves things in this life. That money is always in man's hand. Money will never be in man's heart. So we interact with everything, but we don't love everything. We leave our heart to become a sound heart so that it only loves its Lord. This is how vicegerency works. So the more we work at vicegerency, the more we enrich the vertical relationship. And the more we work on ubudiyah, the more we also encourage the vicegerency. And so vicegerency also comes in levels. As man increases in his ubudiyah, he would want to uphold the rules. Why? Because God will love him more, and because then it helps empty his heart from all interactions except from the love of his God. This is the purpose of life. The purpose of life is to enter and to know God through ourselves, through the universe, through the Quran, to know God, to love him, and to enter into this relationship where we have to uphold also his rules on earth. Now somebody might say, well, I look at my relationship with God as a personal relationship, so nobody should ask me if I pray or if I fast or any of these things, and I will use my brain to deduce rules of how to interact with everything around me. Man can do that. Of course he can, as we discussed before, but he cannot think and expect that whatever his mind brings up of how he should interact with everything else in the universe, that this interaction will feed the vertical relationship with God. He should not expect that, and he should not expect to be prepared for the next phase in his existence. Now we go back to the question of, can I achieve the purpose of life and also achieve my own goal of wanting to do good and help others? Now, how does this work? Now, in order to answer that question, I will also draw another analogy. This is a school. Now, if I send my child to school, then he has the identity of a student. He has a card, he has a number. So his identity now is that he is a student. His purpose is to achieve knowledge, is to learn. Now how he does that, how he achieves that purpose, depends on the environment that he finds himself in. For example, let's say in a poor country where there's war. Now, as somebody who wants to learn and who wants to achieve the purpose of learning, He might have to go like to a single room or a house, somebody's house, where they're holding classes, and he might have to go at night when there's no shooting or anything like that. So even just going to class is by itself a struggle. So what he needs to do, how he needs to interact with the environment to achieve that purpose is different based on the circumstances that he finds himself in. This kind of school, let's say it's in a rich country and people have peace there, there's no war, the bus comes and picks them up, and so it's totally different. The circumstances that that person is going to interact with to achieve the purpose of learning is different. Like this school might have a club for art, it might have a student council, it might have a football team. And that student might be, for example, he has a qualification to be a really good football player, or he has the personality and attitude for helping others, and he might run for president of the student council, and he might get it. And so, what I want to say from that, he might be able to do all of these roles, okay, but it will always be under his student identity. Okay, so he will interact with the other students, he will interact with the teachers, with the classes, doing his homework in a way to achieve the purpose of learning. Now, there's no contradiction between being a football player, a head of a student council, or an artist in the art club. We don't consider these as different goals. Why? Because they're under the umbrella of his student identity. If he starts, for example, saying, I am a football player, and he exchanges that for his student identity, and he says, now I'm a football player, and so he interacts with school, his homework, his classes, and everything as a football player, so he will no longer achieve the purpose of learning. Then there's a problem with this goal. Then this goal will hinder him from achieving the purpose of learning. Now, taking this analogy back to life, where we talked about, can I be a doctor? Can I be a lawyer? Will that hinder the purpose of life? Okay, since the moment we're born, we have an identity because we are born into this life to achieve the purpose of life. And the purpose of this life is to enter this relationship with God, with this ubudiyya relationship. So our identity is our ubudiyya identity. So every circumstance that we find ourselves in, we have to interact with it in a way to achieve our ubudiyya identity. The same as a student. He found he could join the club, he could be a student council, and so on. And so we are born, for example, a male is born into a family, he is the eldest son. If he is born into a very poor family, his father is sick, his mother is sick, there's nobody to support the family, then he has to, in these circumstances, probably drop out of school and find some kind of a job to help sustain his family. This is how he fulfills his ubudiyya identity. For example, if that person was born into a rich family in a wealthy country where there's no war, there's nothing, then he goes to school and he fulfills his ubudiyya identity by being a good student and then using that knowledge also to fulfill his ubudiyya identity. So everybody works in these are like fields or areas where one practices his ubudiyya identity. So let's say he became a physician. He had family that supports him. They were wealthy. He had a good education. He likes to be a doctor. He wants to help people. And then he studies to be a physician. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as it is under his ubudiyya identity. He doesn't exchange being a physician with his ubudiyya identity. Now, there's lots of physicians. If a physician has his identity or his purpose is to collect money, or his purpose is to be a very well-known physician and use that status, then he will be interacting with patients, money, medicine, all of that in a different way. But if this physician, his purpose is to achieve his ubudiyah, that Allah will be pleased with him, then he will be interacting with patients, money, and everything in a way that pleases God. Then being a physician does not hinder me from achieving the purpose of life. It is one of the ways on my way of achieving the purpose of life. Also, because it's under my ubudiyya identity, under the umbrella of my ubudiyya identity, if I am a physician and a father and a son and a husband, then I am going to also be aware how to connect all of them together, so I give everybody their rights, because I want God to be pleased with me. That's another area that is affected also, is how you play all the roles in a way that you give as much as you can fairness in all these roles. So if I'm in one of these roles that I have to play, or these areas where I can practice my ubudiyya, how do I interact to achieve the purpose of life? If I am being a husband or a wife or a mother, how do I achieve the purpose of life while interacting as a mother or as a wife? Well, the first thing is, any action that I want to do, I have to ask a question. Is this action going to get me closer to God? If the answer is yes, then I go on to the next question, which is, how do I do this? How do I act so that I do it according to the way that pleases God? If I am going, for example, to work and to sustain my family, then yes, if I am required to work, then yes, that will get me closer to God. Then I have to ask a question, so how do I do this? What kind of job that will be good and that will be pleasing in the circumstances that I am having? Now, in order to have knowledge to answer these two questions, we need something else. We need knowledge. We need to seek knowledge continuously. The first verse that came from the Quran to the Prophet was read. That was the first word. And so a Muslim has to seek knowledge, to seek that kind of knowledge of how to achieve the purpose of life, all the way till he dies, continuously seeking knowledge in order to know how to fulfill the purpose of life. So if I want to close now, I would like to summarize that the purpose of life is to enter into this bond of love with God, where we surrender to Him willingly and we do what He asked us to, because it is good for us. It will change our hearts, it will change our nafs into the serene and into the sound heart, and it will prepare us for what comes after this material life. And this purpose of life is our ubudiyya identity. It is the identity under which everything else comes under that. I am a physician, I'm a mother, I'm a student, whatever I am, it has to be under my ubudiyya identity for it to prepare me for what comes after life, after this material life. And so through the vision or through the eyes of a believer, one has to observe life. And when one does that, then things in life start to fall into their place, and they start to make more sense. A question like, how do I know what is right and what is wrong? Or why am I not like her? Why has God given her something different than what I have? These all things seem to be connected. They will look connected, and everything will fit in its right place and will make some sense for us. And so when we observe life through the eyes of a believer, obtaining or trying to fulfill the purpose of life, we observe with one eye and we keep the other one to actually seek knowledge with it, because it is very important to obtain that knowledge in order to sustain our ubudiyya identity. Thank you very much, and Jazakumullah khair, and I hope this was of interest and benefit, and I pray for guidance and forgiveness for all of us. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.